Hi everyone, this is Abby, PGY2 Oncology Pharmacy Resident, and for today's Clinical Pearl, I'm going to be discussing a new drug update over Amivantamab. Rybrevant was FDA approved on May 21, 2021 under accelerated approval. It was approved for use in non-small cell lung cancer, locally advanced or metastatic, in adults with EGFR exon 20 insertion mutations, as detected by an FDA-approved test, and also in those patients whose disease has progressed on or after platinum-based chemotherapy. The mechanism of this new monoclonal antibody is rather novel. I think of it as if you were to stand up and you put your hands in the sky like a Y, you basically represent what a monoclonal antibody looks like with its different FAB binding regions, or the fragment antigen binding portions. Now, usually those two arms, as representative of when you put your hands in the sky like a Y, they're usually going to bind the same thing. So for example, cetuximab, both the right and the left portion are going to bind to EGFR. What's different about this new monoclonal antibody is that it's a bispecific growth factor. So the left portion of the monoclonal antibody is different than the right portion or the right side. One side is going to bind EGFR, while the other side binds MET. Amivantamab was approved on the Chrysalis trial, which was a multi-center, non-randomized, open-label, multi-cohort clinical trial. Now, these results were based on 81 patients. These patients had already received prior platinum-based chemotherapy. Some of the other baseline characteristics include that 95% of them had adenocarcinomas, and 46% had received prior immunotherapy. Now, this Chrysalis trial was a single-arm study that did not have a comparator, and response rate was the main endpoint that was evaluated. Of note, the response rate was right at 40%. Something also interesting that came about in this trial was looking at tissue biopsies versus liquid biopsies, or those within the plasma. Now, some of the liquid biopsies were negative, while the tissue biopsies were positive. This also led to the FDA approving the Guardant 360 CDx as a companion diagnostic for Amivantamab. Now, the administration of Amivantamab is rather complex and interesting. It is given via IV. However, for the first 2 weeks, it is given via a peripheral line, and then it can be transitioned to a central line for subsequent doses. Ideally, with this, we're able to control a bit more for infusion-related reactions. As given via a peripheral line, we can slow down the amount of drug that's delivered throughout the body. Versus when we give a medication via a central line, this is going to have direct administration into the superior vena cava, so much more timely distribution throughout the whole body when doing it via a central line. Now, looking at the administration, this is given weekly for 4 weeks, then every other week thereafter. The first dose is actually split up and given over 2 days. The first part of that infusion ideally will take about 4 hours to complete. The second part of that infusion given on day 2 will take about 3 hours. And then, assuming everything is going well and no infusion-related reactions, subsequent doses should be able to be delivered over approximately 2 hours. Now, being this is a monoclonal antibody, we did see a high risk of infusion-related reactions in that Chrysalis trial, approximately 2/3 of patients. Of note, grade 3-4 infusion-related reactions were rather rare. As previously mentioned, this will be given weekly for 4 weeks, then every other week thereafter. And it's going to take approximately 9 weeks for this drug to attain steady state. Therefore, giving it weekly initially for those first 4 weeks, hopefully we'll be able to attain steady state faster. And of note, the PD and PK relationship has not yet been established for Amivantamab. Therefore, potentially we do have room for this dosing schedule to change as we see more clinical utility and use within our patient populations. The dosing schedule of amivantamab is a fixed dosing that's based on patient weight. For patients who weigh less than 80 kilograms, the dose will be 1,050 milligrams. For patients who weigh greater than or equal to 80 kilograms, the dose will be 1,400 milligrams. Patients should also be pre-treated with medications. These include acetaminophen, diphenhydramine, and a glucocorticoid. This includes either dexamethasone or methylprednisolone, or an equivalent. Now, this is recommended for week 1. If patients do well during week 1, the glucocorticoid may be omitted for all future doses. Also of note, once this medication is diluted, it is stable for 10 hours. Some of the toxicities that have been noted with amivantamab include interstitial lung disease and pneumonitis. Also, with targeting that EGFR component, rash was noted. It is recommended to limit sun exposure during treatment with amivantamab and for 2 months afterwards, so this will be a really good counseling point for patients who do receive this monoclonal antibody. Some ocular toxicities were also noted, as well as some nail disturbances or nail toxicities, musculoskeletal pain, and then also AST and ALT abnormalities, which I attribute this coming from that MET component, as MET does have ligands for the hepatocyte growth factor. All in all, the toxicities were very much so expected with what we know about monoclonal antibodies, and also those monoclonal antibodies that are targeting EGFR as well as MET. I do encourage you all to check out the prescribing information or the PI of amivantamab, and this will further discuss the indications, the dosing, further on the chrysalis trial and different nuances with amivantamab, as well as different warnings, precautions, and adverse reactions that we can be monitoring for as healthcare professionals. This is a really new and exciting therapy, and I think there is definitely going to be some utility for this agent, especially in those patients who do have that exon 20 inclusion mutation. Also, the FDA has announced on their website this new monoclonal antibody, and also talks about how it is granted under accelerated approval. So be sure to look out for further studies that either validate what we know about amivantamab or potentially shed light on some new things that we can learn as we start to use this drug in clinical practice. As always, thank you all for listening to today's Clinical Pearl. And if you have questions, you can always email me at aferdinand@monument.health. Thank you.